Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. Hey, remember back in the 80s, maybe even pre-80s, there was a television sitcom called Welcome Back, Kotter, and the song says, "Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back." So, welcome back. I'm glad that you could join us again today. Do you realize how close Christmas is? Yeah, it's right around the corner. Here we are in October. And so we got October, November, December, and you know it's about Christmas time because you go into Walmart and there's Halloween decorations and Christmas decorations, same aisle. Kind of wonky. I hope you get the right one for your tree. I might put a Christmas tree up this year. Maybe they won't come asking for candy at my house. I don't know. That's not a big deal. But here's what I want you to think about. What's some of the songs that are coming up for Christmas? I think of one. It's about a green character. And it's "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." Yeah, Grinch is known for being mean. And the song tells us why he was so mean. His heart was too small. And the book shows that he was mean. So he was a mean person. Now, I'm going to struggle with today's title. It's Mean People and What to Do with Them. Because who are mean people? What are mean people? Mean people are unpleasant people. They are deceptive people. They are controlling people. They want to control your time and your money, and they even control your mind. They are users. They are unkind. And when we see them coming, we do not step aside. We step to the other side of the street. You might even be here to say, "Oh, Pastor, I have got a list of mean people." You want to see it? And I'm glad that I am not like anybody on that list. Well, guess what? You might be on somebody else's list. Or maybe you were on a list of mean people once upon a time. And some people are saying, "Oh, I'm glad this sermon doesn't deal with me." Well, maybe it does. And as I read God's word, I think he calls us to be something different than mean people. The Bible teaches us that it teaches us more about how to respond to mean people than anything else. And the importance of today's message is to help give us a plan of how to deal with mean people. Because without a plan, the mean people in our lives are going to gain a measure of control over our lives. And if we do not have a plan, we're going to start acting like the mean people, if not worse than them. Mean people keep us off balance. Another thing about mean people is not only do they keep us off balance, is that when we are off balance, we try to compensate. And sometimes that compensation ends up hurting us and others as well. When the actions of others knock us off balance, we've got a choice on how we are going to respond or how we are going to react. And I think basically there's one of two things that we do. We either act in the flesh, in our human nature, or as a believer in Jesus Christ, if we're really in sync, we will act in the Spirit and walk in the Spirit and do it the way that God has created us that we can be. Now, in my time as pastor in this great town of Cushing, I've had a couple incidences that come to my mind of times that I had to make that choice of which nature am I going to operate in. I walked into a place that I serve as chaplain, McDonald's. Yeah, I went in there one day and the manager, my friend, he says, "Hey, your buddy made the paper." And I said, "Oh, great, good for him." And I went over to this table where a lady was sitting and she had the newspaper. She was not reading it. And I said, "May I see the paper for a moment?" Very nice voice, just like I said right there. "May I see the paper for a moment?" I'm being kind, right? And her response was, "Get your own paper." Like, ooh, got a little bitter coffee there or something. I don't know, but she was just so angry. And I turned around. I didn't realize there was a stack of other newspapers. So I grabbed one of the newspapers. I grabbed the coffee pot because my philosophy is if it's there, I'm going to fill everybody else's cup, whether they're sitting around me or not. I'm going to try to fill as many cups as possible because that's just who I am. Put that coffee pot back, went over and sat with my paper. I could not read it. I was stewing so much because she had moved into my head and she was blocking my vision of the words of the paper. But then there was another time I was needing to work on our church van and get some things done because the youth group were getting ready to go on a trip. And I was having problems with a neighbor to the church where we park our van. They kept parking in my driveway, and I couldn't get my van out. It was frustrating me. And I confess, I went over in a very fleshly attitude. And I told them that that vehicle had to be moved within the next 10 minutes, or I was going to have it towed at their expense. The next day, still working on the van, and it appears that somebody has sliced the valve stem. What do you do? And you know what I did in those two incidences? I'll tell you next week when you come back. I'll tell you next week. Hey, don't get mad at me. You got to come back because I want you to come back, and you'll find out about it next week. So what do we do when someone has done us dirty? When someone has done dirty deeds to us and they've done them dirt cheap, or they've done the dirty deeds to dirt cheap to somebody within our family, I believe it's natural that we stew and we brew and sometimes we spew. But isn't it amazing that isn't it amazing all of the terrible, no good, very bad things that we think about doing to them? Those terrible things that we come up with within our mind? Now, I think it's hard to be good to people who just aren't good. And those are the mean people. Those that are mean make it feel as if the golden rule doesn't apply to them. What's the golden rule? Jesus said it. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But when mean people are in our lives and they do these things, what we want to do? We want to use the aluminum foil rule. What's the aluminum foil rule? It's flimsy because it says, do to others as they have done to you. So when we get knocked off balance, we try to compensate, but not always with the one who knocked us off balance. We think of and we act, and so what comes out is, I'll take it out on you because I can't take it out on them. Now, I've often said, we tend to treat the ones we love the most the worst. We tend to treat the ones we love the most the worst. Some people go, wow, they must love me a lot. So what do we do with mean people? We can daydream about doing dirty deeds dirt cheap. We can dream about getting even, but here's the problem with getting even. The problem with getting even is getting even makes us even with somebody we don't even like. Getting even makes us even with somebody we don't even like. It makes us like someone we dislike. What do? What can we, so one of the things we can do, we could be like a little toddler and close our eyes and pretend that they're not there anymore. You can ignore them, but they just move more furniture into the space of your mind and they don't pay you rent. Then we can tap the brakes and we can react and we can give them the victory trophy of power over us, and we don't even get a participation trophy. So ignoring them and getting even isn't a way moving forward. There's another way. And the option decreases their power over us. And it allows us to guard and protect our hearts. It also makes a better story for our own life. And God's word has so much about that. Jesus showed us what to do. But not only do we read about what to do in the New Testament in the words of Jesus, if we go backwards to the Old Testament, and it's not really backwards, if we just find another story in the Bible, God can teach us great things. We have a man, we've heard about it, I believe you've heard about him. His name was David. David had been a shepherd. Then he became a giant killer. Then he became a servant of Saul. Then he became king. But there is a time between being a servant and being the king that he's a man on the run. He's running for his own life because Saul, more than once, tried to kill him. More than once. He hated him. He had a mark out, get David. There's reward posters all over the place. Saul wanted to take David out, forgetting that David was the guy that saved his kingdom. David saved all of the people from Goliath. and Saul tended to forget. So look with me. Oh, another thing about Saul found out that David was going to be the next king, not one of his sons. He had 3 sons. And David's very best friend was one of his sons, Jonathan. But they were not the ones that are going to be on the throne next. It's going to be David. So there's a lot of jealousy going on in Saul. But I invite you to look at this passage, and there's somebody else other than Saul. And we find this passage in 1 Samuel chapter 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Moab. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband, a Calebite, was surly and mean in his dealings. While David was in the desert, he heard of Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal in Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.' Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your servants were with us, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my young men. Since we have come at a festive time, please give your servant and your son David whatever you can find for them." When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. So David's men, they go up and they're trying to get some food, but they get something a little bit different. And interesting, he says they waited. Now Nabal's name means fool. Some people may say that his name means brutal or mean, and we do read here that he was a very mean in the way that he dealt with things. But David said, "Hey, we were giving protection to your men while they were shearing the sheep. We were watching them. We had their back. We were the ones that were aiding in your profit." So sheep shearing would have been a time of profit, because however many sheep you've got and you're shearing them, that's going to be your profit margin. Let's go on. Verse 10, Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and meat I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where?" David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Put on your swords." So they put on their swords, and David put on his. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. David has gone to Nabal. Nabal is wealthy. His men had been shearing the sheep. It was a time where Nabal was making a lot of money. David sends a message. He says, "I come in peace. I've provided protection. I've helped you with your profit. So since we did this for you at no charge, maybe you could give us a meal." David isn't Mr. Nice Guy. He has been going around killing Philistines. But he doesn't just kill Philistine men. He knocks out whole villages. He kills men, women, and children, and he takes the plunder. He's doing pretty well. Nabal pushes the envelope and he taunts David. Basically, Nabal says, "I didn't ask for protection, so why should I give you anything? I mean, you're sending me the bill, but I didn't ask for you to do anything." Does Nabal even know who he's messing with? This is David, the giant killer. What might be... So why are you doing this? But notice what David does. He straps on his sword. What do you know about his sword? It's very possible Because, I mean, when David killed Goliath, he was a small, younger kid, and the sword was heavy. But David's grown up. David's stronger. And it's very possible that he's carrying Goliath's sword. But Goliath's sword isn't just Goliath's sword. It's not just the sword that David used to cut off Goliath's head. It's more than that. It represents God's provision. It represents God's protection. It represents God's power. It's a symbol of victory. It's a symbol of God's favor. And David didn't need to take matters into his own hand. What did he do with Goliath? He says, you come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, because God's name was more powerful than what you've got in your hands, Goliath. He had God who would fight his battles for him. All he had to do is call on God, and God would intervene on David's behalf. Now keep in mind, David's very hurt. He's emotionally hurt. He has done great things for Saul, and Saul is out to get him. Saul has disrespected him. When David had rescued him, Saul and all of his people, here is Saul. I'm going to take him out. David isn't just hurt, he's angry. How could Saul do this? But keep in mind, hurting people hurt people, and hurting people are unpredictable. David is hurt, and it's causing him to forget about God's favor and God's provision. God's calling on his life and God's provision for him. Go down to verse 21. David had just said, it's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert, so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. And may God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of who belonged to him. So I think if you look at this passage, both Nabal and David are overreacting. Note the words, evil for good. Nabal has traded evil for good, and David is getting ready to do evil for evil. So there's four things that I think that we need to begin thinking about. And when we think about the mean people that we deal with, not back years ago, but the mean people we're dealing with right now, mean people in your life, I think there's some questions that we need to ask. And I think there are questions that you need to be writing down. And I believe that there are questions you need to pass on to your children. Because how we deal with mean people is going to say a lot about our relationship with Jesus Christ. And we can't ignore mean people. And we can't get even with mean people. But I believe that we've got this third option. We've got another way that we can go. And I think these four questions are going to help us. First of all, do you want to get even with someone you don't even like? Well, duh. Who doesn't? I don't want to be like them. I want to be more like Jesus. And I think we all know the answer to that question. Do you want to be even with somebody you don't even like? You know the answer. It's our natural response. Our natural response is to get even with somebody we don't even like. Getting even doesn't end the cycle. It perpetuates the cycle. And there's one other worse plan than getting even. It's stooping to a level that's even farther below what they've done to us. It's doing dirty deeds cheaper than were done to us. It's lowering our standards. Question number 2. Would you rather be ahead? Would you rather be ahead? Would you rather advance farther than where they are? This isn't natural. It's amazing you pull ahead by refusing to get even. Question 3. And I think this is what we're going to be talking about next week. We've talked about these two characters, David and Nabal, but there's a third character, and this third character asked David this question. What story do you want to tell? What story do you want to tell? Remember, you're going to be known for your opinion, but you're going to be remembered for your love. Do you want a story of them winning? Or do you want the story of how God has changed your life? Now, there's one more, and this is really the on-ramp to the high road. And it's not an easy place to go. And here's the question. What would it look like if you returned good for evil? What would it look like if you returned good for evil? More than refusing to act or repay evil for evil, but to be kind and to take seriously the words of Jesus, do good to those who mistreat you. It's more than tolerate. It's more than ignore. It's forgive them. Because Jesus knows that doing good to those who mistreat us frees us. But not only does it free us, it protects our hearts. Getting even is natural, it's predictable. And I believe that God's word calls us to be unpredictable so that we can write a different story on the pages of our life, a story worth telling. Remarkable begins with the way that you answer question number 4, because you're not going to pull ahead acting like them. It takes a relationship with Jesus to be able to pull ahead. And I would love to talk to you one-on-one about that relationship with Jesus, because he has great plans for you. He doesn't see you where you are. He sees you where you can be and as you can be in him. Friends, thank you for being with us today, and may the favor and blessings of God be upon you, and may his protection be with you as well. Bye-bye.